Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're diving into a topic that I think a lot of us tend to maybe shy away from a little bit, death.
Mm.
But don't worry, this isn't going to be a super morbid conversation. We're going to be exploring how death is portrayed in the wizarding world of Harry Potter. And, using some really fascinating academic analysis to guide us.
Yeah.
You might be surprised by the depth and complexity
Yeah.
that J.K. Rowling weaves into her stories.
Yeah, for sure.
And, it's a series where death is a constant presence.
Right.
It shapes characters. It drives the plot forward.
Yeah.
And it ultimately prompts us to think about our own mortality a little bit.
Yeah, and what I find so intriguing is how the series really presents these different perspectives on death right from the start. You have Dumbledore, of course, with his famous quote about death being the next great adventure.
Right.
But then you have Voldemort, who is absolutely terrified of it.
Yeah. I always found that contrast so striking. On the one hand, you have this wise, almost comforting perspective.
Yeah.
And on the other, this just like raw, desperate terror.
It really reflects, I think, a fundamental human struggle, doesn't it? Like embracing life's natural cycle versus clinging to existence at any cost.
Right.
Dumbledore's view suggests, acceptance, a willingness to let go.
Yeah.
But Voldemort's fear drives him to these extremes.
And those extremes lead him down a very dark path, like creating those Horcruxes, right? It's such a creepy concept, splitting your soul and hiding pieces and objects to try to become immortal. But I remember being struck by how each murder he commits to create a Horcrux actually makes him less human, like his soul is fracturing.
Exactly. It's like this desperate grasp for immortality, but the very act of trying to cheat death diminishes his humanity. And it really raises that question of, what does it truly mean to live a meaningful life, especially when we're faced with our own mortality?
It's a question that resonates, I think, beyond the pages of a fantasy novel. I mean, think about the lengths people go to in our own world to prolong life, sometimes even to the detriment of their quality of life. It makes you wonder if there's a point where that pursuit of immortality actually becomes self-defeating.
It's a fascinating philosophical question, and the series doesn't shy away from exploring it through Voldemort's chilling journey. But of course, there are other ways to confront death. And the series highlights the power of sacrifice as well. I mean, Lily Potter's self-sacrifice to save Harry is one of the most iconic moments in the entire series.
Oh, absolutely.
Her love for her son literally shields him from death's grip.
Such a powerful act of love. And it makes you think about the sacrifices people make in real life for those they love. I mean, we see it every day. Parents putting their children's needs before their own, first responders risking their lives to save others. They might not be on the same grand scale as Lily Potter's sacrifice, but they demonstrate that same profound selflessness.
And that selflessness echoes throughout the series. I'm thinking of Harry himself in the final book, willingly facing his own death to defeat Voldemort.
Right.
These acts suggest that love and self-sacrifice have a power that transcends death itself.
It's almost like death loses its sting a little bit when it's faced with that kind of profound love. But, the series doesn't just focus on these grand acts of heroism. It also shows us the raw, gut-wrenching pain of death and how characters cope with grief and loss.
Absolutely. We see it with Harry, of course, who experiences loss throughout the series. But there are other characters as well, like Neville Longbottom, who loses his parents to a fate worse than death.
Right.
Sirius Black, whose death hits Harry especially hard.
Yeah.
And then there's George Weasley. Their journeys really highlight, I think, the resilience it takes to confront grief and the importance of finding support from those around you.
That's one of the things I appreciate about the Harry Potter series. It doesn't sugarcoat the pain of loss, but it also shows us the power of resilience and the importance of human connection in the face of tragedy. It's like the series is saying, yes, death is a part of life, but we're not alone in facing it. Now, we can't talk about death in Harry Potter without mentioning those mysterious Deathly Hallows, the Elder Wand, the Resurrection Stone, the Invisibility Cloak, each imbued with such power and symbolism.
The Deathly Hallows are fascinating because they each represent a different attitude towards death, don't they? The Elder Wand represents the allure of power, even over death itself.
Right.
The Resurrection Stone embodies that yearning to undo loss, to bring back those we've lost. And the Invisibility Cloak, perhaps most subtly, suggests a kind of acceptance of death's inevitability, but it's Harry's journey as the master of death. That I find most intriguing.
Here's where I think things get really interesting. He manages to unite all three Hallows, which is an incredible feat in itself. But he doesn't use them for selfish gain. He doesn't try to conquer death or bring back the dead. Instead, he makes a choice. That, I think, reflects a deeper understanding.
You're right. He rejects the allure of power and the temptation to undo loss. He chooses to wield the hallows responsibly, demonstrating a maturity and an understanding that even Voldemort, with all of his obsession with immortality, never achieved.
It's like he realizes that true mastery over death isn't about controlling it or defying it, but accepting it as a part of life's natural cycle. And that brings us to another layer of complexity in the series, the prophecy linking Harry and Voldemort. It's almost like this theme of death is woven into their destinies from the very beginning.
The prophecy definitely adds this element of predestination to their stories, the sense of inevitability, like their final confrontation is something that they can't escape.
Right.
But even within that framework of destiny, the series emphasizes Harry's agency, his ability to make choices.
Absolutely. Even though he's told that he might die facing Voldemort, Harry still chooses to confront him. He doesn't give in to despair or try to run from his fate. He actively chooses to fight, even knowing the risks.
And that choice underscores, I think, a really powerful message. That even when faced with what seems like inevitable death, we still have the power to choose how we respond. We can choose courage over fear, action over passivity, love over hate.
It's a reminder that even when faced with something as daunting as death, we're not powerless. We still have agency. We can still choose how we want to live, how we want to face our fears. And there's one scene in the final book that always gets to me. It's Harry's encounter with Dumbledore after Voldemort kills him. That scene in this King's Cross-like space had always felt so comforting to me. Even though it's dealing with death, it left such a powerful impression, and I'm curious to get your perspective on it.
It's one of the most evocative and emotionally charged moments in the entire series. This beautiful portrayal of an afterlife, one that's open to interpretation. But it suggests that death is not an ending, but a transition.
It always left me wondering about what happens after we die. Is it something to fear, or is it more like passing through a doorway into another realm?
And speaking of the afterlife, the wizarding world has some unique ways of interacting with death, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah.
It's a world where ghosts are a part of everyday life, not just spooky tales told around a campfire.
Right. Ghosts are practically part of the furniture at Hogwarts. I mean, nearly Headless Nick is practically a school mascot. But I always wondered why they choose to stay behind instead of moving on. What is it about the world of the living that they cling to?
It's a question that brings us back to that fundamental fear of the unknown, isn't it? Like Voldemort clinging to life at any cost. Ghosts, in their own way, represent a resistance to letting go.
It almost makes you wonder if there's a sense of peace in truly letting go, in embracing the mystery of what lies beyond. It's like the series is telling us that. Death, though a constant presence, shouldn't overshadow the beauty and wonder of life. It's about finding meaning and purpose, even amidst loss and uncertainty.
Exactly. It encourages us to revisit familiar stories with a fresh perspective and to keep exploring these complex and fascinating themes.
You know, it's funny. When I first read the Harry Potter books as a kid, I was mostly caught up in the magic and adventure. But rereading them as an adult, I'm struck by how much depth there is to these stories, especially when it comes to exploring themes like death and loss.
It's a testament to Rowling's skill as a storyteller, that she can weave such profound themes into a series that's also incredibly entertaining.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up our deep dive into death in the Harry Potter universe, what's the main takeaway you hope our listeners glean from this conversation?
The main takeaway is that death, though a constant presence in this series, is ultimately about how we choose to live. It's about embracing life's adventures, cherishing our connections with others, and facing challenges with courage and compassion.
Beautifully said. It's about finding the light in the darkness, the hope amidst the grief. And, even though we've been talking about some pretty heavy stuff today, I don't feel weighed down by it. If anything, it's made me appreciate the series even more.
I agree. Exploring these themes can be both challenging and enriching. It can help us gain, I think, a deeper understanding of ourselves and the world around us.
And with that, dear deep divers, we come to the end of our exploration. But before we go, we want to leave you with a final thought-provoking question, one that might linger with you long after this deep dive is over.
If you had the choice to become a ghost, would you? Why or why not?
That's a question that really gets to the heart of how we view death, doesn't it? What do we believe happens afterward? Do we cling to the familiar? Or do we embrace the mystery of the unknown?
It's a question that has no easy answers, and that's what makes it so compelling.
And that, my friends, is the magic of a truly great story. It stays with you. It makes you think. And maybe even changes the way you see the world. So go back to those Harry Potter books or movies, deep divers, and see what new insights you uncover. Death might be a constant in the wizarding world and our own, but it's how we face it, how we live our lives. That truly matters.
Until next time, keep diving deep and never stop questioning the world around you. And it's not just about individual choices, is it? The series also explores how wizarding culture as a whole approaches death. You think about those moving memorials at Hogwarts and the whole concept of magical funerals.
Oh, absolutely. Those scenes always struck me as both beautiful and a little bit eerie. It's like they had this way of honoring the dead. That's both more tangible and perhaps more emotionally charged than what we're used to in the Muggle world.
Exactly. It highlights the respect and significance that they place on remembering those who've passed. But I think they also emphasize the community's role in sharing grief and offering support. It's a reminder that even in death, we're not alone.
It makes me think about how different cultures around the world approach death and remembrance. Some cultures celebrate life with these vibrant festivals, while others focus on quiet reflection and mourning. It seems like the wizarding world has this kind of unique blend of reverence and acceptance.
It does, doesn't it? And that brings us to, I think, an intriguing point of comparison. How wizards and muggles perceive death. Wizards have magic, with the potential to prolong life, or even resist death in ways that muggles can't even imagine.
Right, like with Horcruxes,
Mm-hmm.
or the Deathly Hallows. It makes you wonder, does having access to magic make it harder or easier to accept death? Does it create a different kind of grief, knowing that there might have been magical options to prevent loss?
That's such a thought-provoking question. Imagine the ethical dilemmas wizards must face. If you could use magic to extend someone's life, but maybe not fully cure them, would you do it? Or if you had the resurrection stone, would you use it to bring back a loved one, knowing that it might not truly be them?
Those are heavy questions, and I think the series touches on them in subtle ways. You see characters grappling with those choices, weighing the potential benefits of magic against the potential consequences. It makes you realize that, even with magic, there are no easy answers when it comes to death.
And perhaps that's one of the most profound takeaways from the series. Whether you're a wizard with access to these extraordinary powers, or a muggle facing the limitations of our own mortality, death is something we all must confront. It's a universal experience. That ultimately connects us all.
It's a reminder that despite our differences, we share this fundamental human experience. We live, we love, we lose,
Yeah.
and we grieve. And I think the series, in its own way, offers a message of hope and resilience, even in the face of death. There's still beauty to be found in life, in the connections we forge, and in the choices we make.
It really makes you think about, the choices we make
Yeah.
and the impact they have on our lives and the lives of those around us.
It does, and I think that's one of the things that makes the Harry Potter series so enduringly popular. It's not just a story about magic and adventure, but it's also a story about the power of love and friendship and courage. And those themes resonate with readers of all ages. They transcend the boundaries of genre and age.
Absolutely. I think that the series offers us a glimpse into what it means to be human, with all of its complexities and contradictions.
Yeah, and it reminds us that even in the darkest of times, there's always hope.
Always.
Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive into death in the Harry Potter universe. But before we go, we want to leave our listeners with one final thought. If you had the choice to become a ghost, would you? Why or why not? It's a question that really makes you think about your own beliefs, about life and death, and what you value most in this world.
It does, and I think it's a question that each of us needs to answer for ourselves.
Absolutely. So until next time, deep divers, keep exploring those big questions and never stop seeking out those deeper meanings in the stories that you love.
And remember, as Dumbledore wisely said, to the well-organized mind, death is but the next great adventure.
Thanks for joining us.